Before we get to positional targets, we're going to look ahead. Good news, bad news may be coming up for the Gators. But before we get to the positional targets, let's get into two players that really seem to be trending Florida right now. Linebacker Malik Morris and tight end Heze Kent. It's pretty interesting to see that four-star Malik Morris, linebacker from Lakeland, he was supposed to visit Colorado and Missouri the past week, skipped those trips entirely. Instead, he showed up to Gainesville on Thursday, staying through Saturday. This is right after his official visit to the Gators last weekend. Let's just say the vibe at Florida is pretty darn optimistic right now for linebacker Malik Morris. And we'll see what happens down the road with linebacker Isaiah Williams. He was on campus too as well, last weekend. But Malik Morris looking good. Texas A&M maybe still hanging around, but Florida looks like they're in the driver's seat for Morris. Morris should be making a decision sometime this summer. But he was spotted hanging out with a bunch of Florida, players at the camp Friday night. And then pretty cool to see this. This guy helped Florida. Malik Morris developing a strong connection with Gator linebacker legend Brandon Spikes. Of course, we all know he's heavily involved with the program right now. Those two were always together when you see him on campus. When Morris is in Gainesville, Brandon Spikes, not far away. That's got to be helping Florida here. And then for four-star tight end Heze Kent from up the road in Brunswick, Georgia, Florida feels really good about where they stand right now. Interestingly enough, Miami might not be the biggest competition anymore. We'll see what happens there. Now, maybe the scary part. Texas maybe trying to get into the mix a little bit more. We'll get into some Florida-Texas battles. Kent took an official visit there last week. Supposed to be checking out FSU this weekend. His decision coming up on July the 12th. As of right now, late June, Florida feels pretty good about where they're at for the big-time tight end. All right, so let's get into some positional storylines here in recruiting before we sign off here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. And defensive line. That's been the position getting a lot of notoriety. There's a lot of storylines here, especially after getting the commitment of McCoy. But he's considered more of an edge player, more of an edge type. We'll see what he grows into. But when looking at true defensive linemen, it's not looking as good as it once did for the Gators. Likely losing J.J. Perez at home state, Ohio State. Big plug in the middle that was much needed. Now may not be part of the class when it's all said and done. That move may happen soon. So keep an eye on that one. So as far as targets go, he's a commit right now, Perez, but we'll move past him, go to some other targets here. And it seems to be right now Texas is hurting Florida right here. The Longhorns there in Austin hurting Florida here up front in the defensive line trenches. Vodney Cleveland committed to Texas on Saturday. Major defensive line target that was looking good for Florida pretty recently, only to commit to Texas. Remember, about a week ago, he was getting predicted to pick Florida while on his Texas visit last weekend. Nah, that didn't mean much, did it? Vodney Cleveland, big-time Florida target, committing to Texas on Saturday. And then another Florida versus Texas battle here for defensive lineman Kendall Guerville. That's trending towards Texas right now. Early on, it looked good for Florida, for the Fort Myers player, but an April trip to Austin may have started to tilt this one toward Texas. A decision, it seemed like it wasn't likely until December, but now seems to be pushed up to July the 2nd. 6'4", 315 pounds would be a great addition to the Florida defensive line. May have to try and flip, these two guys down the road now. Vaughn Sonnet, getting predictions for Florida. We'll see where that one goes. See if some of these things towards Texas might change this one. I was told that might be, when some of these predictions were coming in, I was being told it might be a little bit premature. Now, with what's happening at Texas, who knows how this shifts Florida's board. Doesn't mean you won't be committing to Florida, but it may not be as imminent as it seemed. Over the weekend, Canton at South Carolina. Visited Georgia this weekend. Once again, great size, 6'3", 316 pounds. Definitely the type of body size Florida needs up front. Have to wait and see how that one goes. James Johnson from Miami seems to be trending more towards the Miami-Georgia battle. So we'll see where that goes. Preston Carey from IMG is another option. He remains a top target, but not really clear on his recruitment status. 4-star from New York, been playing at IMG, considering several programs. Florida competing against Georgia, Auburn, Rutgers, USC for his commitment. Following his June official visit to Gainesville, Florida's positioned itself pretty well there. Not sure if he'd be above everybody else I mentioned on the board, but kind of seeing the storylines here. Napier, Gerald Chapman, they've prioritized Carey, maintained consistent contact through the recruitment process, so interest has been there. His decision expected by the end of June. The Gators have a legitimate shot here. Not really clear who the leader is in that recruitment. So this position looked better at one time for Florida. Now may have to go back to the board, pursue some more targets that fit that defensive tackle, nose tackle role. Texas pursuing many of the same targets, put some damage to it for now. Now Texas, they're targeting a lot and getting a lot of defensive linemen. So we'll see how many they can fit, how many they want to pay. But it's clear they see the importance of building in the trenches as they make this transition to the SEC. They're targeting many. Got a lot of money to spend. Let's just hope they find some other targets besides the ones mentioned here and when it's all said and done. But for right now, Texas hurting Florida here on the defensive line. Now at edge, Florida's still looking pretty more favorable here for one of the top players in the country at the position. Trenton Henderson from Pensacola. May have to overcome a visit, to Texas for this one too. But really trending towards Florida heading into the weekend. Hopefully Texas doesn't put full court press on, or maybe they got some other targets there. But either way, still trending pretty positively for Trenton Henderson at the edge spot for the Gators. Let's go to wide receiver. Of course, talked about two great pickups recently. Most recently, Marquez Daniel, also Justin Williams. Puts together a really good receiver class for Florida if it holds. I think Florida currently looks good for two more wide receivers. St. Augustine, 4-star wide receiver, of course, Amorian Wingo. He's taken that short ride from the First Coast down to Gainesville a lot. Seems like Florida's trending the right way so far with a battle with Miami for this one. Maybe some other schools trying to get into the mix. I predict Billy G gets his guy here. South Carolina trying to get into it more a bit as well. Another target's 4-star wide receiver, Davion Gross from Texas. Offers elite playmaking ability as both a receiver and a runner. Another versatile type here at receiver for Florida. Following his first official visit to Florida last weekend, he was really impressed, stating that the Gators exceeded his expectations. Florida's firmly put themselves in this one. Baylor appeared to be the current front runner. They hosted him this past weekend. We'll see if they make a move here, but they might have some ground to make up against Florida. I'll keep an eye out for that one. And we already saw Florida assistant Chad Lucas go into his home state of Alabama and pull Marquez Daniel. Can he do it again? 5-star wide receiver Cedarian Morgan. Morgan put Florida in his top 2. Along with the in-state Crimson Tide, Bama will still be tough to beat here. So I think right now with wide receiver, a lot where Florida is for Davion Gross. And then, of course, Samorian Wingo from St. Augustine. Let's go to cornerback. We discussed the commitment of C.J. Brona earlier as the lone commitment. He is the only commitment. There's been a lot of movement there for Florida at cornerback this class so far. We certainly need to take a look at what can happen at the spot. Most likely next one would be 4-star C.J. Hester. Prospect from Cocoa has had Florida leading for a while now. He makes his decision on July the 1st. So about a little week away here. He can move around in the secondary, but Florida wants him at corner. Auburn, Syracuse, or other schools in the mix, but Florida will be hard to beat there. It's going to be a dogfight with FSU for 4-star Chauncey Kennan. He visited Florida a ton in the spring, but FSU is putting up a real battle here after his official visit there. His decision is scheduled for July the 6th, so should be getting a pretty clear picture at corner here for Florida. pretty soon, July 1st, July 6th. Another top option may be Brody Jennings from Mandarin in Jacksonville. He's currently committed to Michigan, but of course has plenty of former teammates on Florida's roster. That certainly helps. Proximity can help there as well. So Florida's got some options at corner. And then let's go back to offensive line. Pretty interesting here. With the commitments of Chukwuem and Lucas, Gators now have 4 offensive linemen committed. Plan there has been to take 5. There's some upcoming decisions that could finish off the offensive lineman part of the class. On the interior and more of a need, Florida seems to be looking good for 3-star Desmond Green. Predictions have been flooding in for Green to commit to Florida over Georgia and South Carolina. Green hails from South Carolina, has a commitment date set for June 26th, so should be getting this answer soon. Georgia was thought to be the team to beat until Green took his official to Florida last weekend, and Florida seemed to nail that visit as that recruitment started to shift away from the Bulldogs towards Florida. Also, even while Green visited home state South Carolina over the weekend. Helping Florida here is current Gators commit Janare Carr. He's trying to help get this one done for the Gators to give a good 1-2 punch along the interior of the offensive line. So that would be Florida's 5th. Would Florida take more? Because 4-star offensive tackle Claude Puma, he set his decision for June 29th after naming Florida his leader last weekend. Auburn, Michigan, Nebraska, and Ohio State are other finalists, but maybe thought to be more of a Florida-Nebraska battle for the Chicago prospect. Took an official to Nebraska this weekend, so we'll see if they can flip the recruitment into their favor. Now, Florida, we'll see how more. Florida could be seemingly set with tackle already, so I'm not sure how much pursuit there is for Florida, but he did name Florida his leader. But there's been a lot of offensive, got 2 tackle commits recently. So does that change? So in about a week, Florida's offensive line class could be completely finished as long as they hang on to the guys that they have committed and maybe about to commit. Guys who are about to make decisions.